Some children grow up learning how to ride a bike. Others learn something very different. They learn how to calm an adult down. Maybe you remember moments like this. A parent sitting quietly at the kitchen table late at night. The room feels heavy. You can feel something is wrong even before they say a word. Then they start talking about their stress, their arguments, their worries about money, their disappointment with life. And somehow, you're the one listening. You're just a child. But you nod, you comfort them, you try to say the right thing. People might have even said something like this to you growing up. You're so mature for your age. You understand people so well. You're the only one I can talk to. At the time, it probably felt like love, like trust. But there's a question most people never ask. What happens to a child when they're forced to grow up emotionally too soon? Because many adults today are still living with the invisible effects of this, and they don't even realize it. At first, it doesn't feel strange. In fact, it can feel special. Your parent tells you things they don't tell anyone else. Their problems, their stress, their fears. And you listen carefully. You try to help. You learn how to read their emotions. If they walk into the room quietly, you notice. If their voice sounds tired, you notice. If they seem upset, you notice immediately. Slowly, without anyone explaining it to you, something begins to change. You start thinking about their feelings before your own. And little by little, you become emotionally older than your age. Not because you wanted to, but because you had to. Pause for a moment and think about this. When a child feels confused, sad, or overwhelmed, who is supposed to help them understand those emotions? Usually, it's the parent. The parent is supposed to say things like, "It's okay to feel sad. Tell me what happened. I'm here for you." But when a child becomes the emotional support system, that role flips. The child becomes the listener, the comforter, the problem solver. And while this might look like maturity on the outside, inside something important is missing. The child never fully gets to be a child. Psychologists call this emotional parentification. It happens when a child takes on emotional responsibilities that normally belong to the parent. But the confusing part is, it doesn't always look harmful. There may be no yelling, no obvious conflict. Sometimes the parent truly loves the child, but they rely on them emotionally in ways that child was never meant to carry. Imagine being 10 years old, trying to understand adult problems. Divorce, financial stress, loneliness, relationship pain. You hear everything. But you don't yet have the emotional tools to process it, so you do the only thing you can. You absorb it, quietly. You become the emotional sponge of the family. And here's where something interesting happens. Many children who grow up like this develop personalities that seem incredibly strong. They become deeply empathetic. They can read people easily. They sense emotional shifts almost instantly. Friends often say things like, "You give the best advice. You're such a good listener. You understand people so well." And it's true. But behind that strength, there's often a hidden cost. Because when you spend childhood focused on everyone else's emotions, you never fully learn how to focus on your own. Later in life, certain patterns start appearing. You feel responsible for everyone. You struggle to say no. You feel uncomfortable when someone around you is upset, even if it has nothing to do with you. Your mind automatically starts asking, how do I fix this? How do I make them feel better? How do I solve the problem? It's like your brain is constantly scanning the room, looking for emotional fires to put out. Relationships can also become complicated because when you grow up as the emotional caretaker, you often attract people who need a lot of emotional support. Friends who rely on you heavily,
Partners who unload their problems onto you. People who say, "You're the only one who understands me." Part of you feels proud hearing that, but another part of you feels something else. Exhaustion. Deep emotional exhaustion.
Here's another thing many people in this situation don't realize. When you grow up comforting others, you often learn to hide your own needs. Think about it. If your parent was overwhelmed, sad, or struggling, the last thing you wanted to do was add more problems. So you stayed strong. You handled things alone. You told yourself, it's not a big deal. I'll deal with it myself. And over time, that becomes your default. So pause for a moment and ask yourself something honestly. When life becomes difficult, do you easily open up to someone, or do you automatically try to handle everything alone?
For many former family therapists, asking for help feels strangely uncomfortable, almost unnatural, because deep down, their brain learned a rule very early in life. Your job is to support others, not the other way around. But here's the realization that changes everything. The child who became the emotional support system was never supposed to carry those emotions in the first place. You were a child. You were supposed to be supported too. You were supposed to be comforted. You were supposed to feel safe sharing your own emotions. And when people begin to understand this pattern later in life, something powerful happens. The invisible pressure starts to fade. The pressure to always be the strong one, the fixer, the peacemaker, the therapist for everyone else. Because being the child who helped everyone survive emotionally doesn't mean you have to keep doing it forever. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to feel overwhelmed. You are allowed to say, I can't carry this for you. And most importantly, you are allowed to stop being the therapist and finally become someone who is cared for too. If this story felt strangely familiar, you're not alone. Many people grew up becoming the emotional support system for their family. And sometimes the first step toward healing is simply understanding what happened. If you want more videos that help you understand your mind, your emotions, and the hidden patterns that shape your life, consider subscribing, because the struggles we carried silently as children often explain the adults we became.